It's the Tony Rose Morning Show on D93, and coming up Friday night at SKyPAC, the Southern Kentucky Performing Arts Center, our friends from ZZ Top are going to be in town playing live for you for the first time in about 15 years. They're going to be back here live in town. And with that being said, perfect timing, too, for the guest that we have coming on for us. Brand new book out called Gimme All Your Lovin, The Blues, Boogie, and Beard of ZZ Top's Billy F. Gibbons. We've been giving away copies of it on the air, and we are very happy to have the author of the book, Christopher McKittrick, with us. Chris, good morning, buddy. How you doing, man?
Good morning. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, man. So backstory here for us, man. ZZ Top, it's hard to put all of the story of ZZ Top into just one book, especially Billy Gibbons, one of the most legendary rock and rollers of all time. What inspires you to do this? Are you obviously got to be a ZZ Top fan to be part of this, but what made you want to sit down, put pen to paper, and tell a story and tell some stories that we may not know about?
Yeah, thank you for asking that question. So, longtime fan of ZZ Top, always been a big fan of the band, and I've written several books on rock and roll. What I've always liked to focus on is sort of looking at the fact and the fiction and the mythology about all these bands I write about. Especially with the internet, there's so many stories that float around about these bands. And a lot of times the truth is a lot wilder than what's floating around there as rumor. So that's what I kind of like to do. I like to talk to people who work with, I talk to many people who worked with Billy Gibbons on albums or on tours, and wanted to find out, some background information about his career. He's one of the most recognizable figures in rock and roll, not just because of his look, but because of his tone, his guitar and his singing. So I really wanted to try to capture that and find out a little more about who he is, because he can be a little bit funny in his interviews, let me put it that way, and not very forthcoming. So I thought maybe I'll ask people that know him best.
Of course, telling this story, when did you really when did you start working on it? Obviously, the book is out now, and we're going to tell folks how they can pick up a copy of the book as well. But when did you start working on this? Obviously, you just don't sit down and write a book overnight. How much time and research did it take to put this book out?
Well, as a ZZ Top listener, I would say the short version is all my life, because I've been listening to them forever. But in truth, writing and researching, it took about a good solid 2 years. Because finding out the information, looking up, decades of articles about the band and interviews, and of course interviewing people. Some of the folks I spoke to were Terry Manning, who was the engineer on most of ZZ Top's classic albums, all the way up through Recycler in 1990, and starting from Trace Hombres in the 70s. He's, of course, also worked with Led Zeppelin and so many other legendary bands. So talking to him was a thrill. And another one I spoke to that was a great interview was a man by the name of Robin Hood Bryant, who engineered their first two albums in a small studio back in Texas. So he was great to talk to, because he could share a lot of the stories of the early days.
Of course, other books that you've about, legendary rock and roll bands, Rolling Stones, Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, and now ZZ Top. How does ZZ Top, as you start pulling apart the story and the fabric of the band and talking to people connected to the band in such intimate ways, how do their stories kind of be in with their roots and their backgrounds coming out of the Texas area and that area versus the Rolling Stones and people like Petty? How do their stories differ and just the tone of interviews change as you get into bands like ZZ Top?
Well, ZZ Top always celebrated their Texas roots, which is not common. You never hear a band, talking about how they're really proud of their Minnesota roots.
Right.
Or and I'm not picking on Minnesota, it's just the first state that came to mind. So ZZ Top very early on decided that they wanted to be sort of the part of the iconography of Texas. Yeah. Texas is a state that has so much imagery that we associate, from the longhorn steers to the cowboy hats to the fashion to the everything's bigger in Texas. They really embraced that. And from the very early days, they were known as that little old band from Texas. They wanted that connection. And in the 70s, they went on this legendary tour called the Worldwide Texas Tour, where they toured with live farm animals, like on stage, and played on stage The Shape of Texas. They really wanted to bring that image, even if it was a little stereotypical of Texas.
Yeah.
It really kind of gave someone something for people to latch onto, especially international audiences who, may not be so familiar with most of the United States, but certainly they heard of Texas and cowboys and, things like that. So it really worked to their advantage to give the band a unified image on stage and sort of a backstory that people could really sink their teeth into.
As an author, again, you're not only telling a story, you're not only writing a book, but you're also writing something that generations down the road, will be able to reference, especially when they maybe get exposed to the music of ZZ Top and they start looking and they find the book. How important is it to you as an author to tell not only a captivating story in the book, but also to make sure that all the history in the book is right, all the stories are right? I mean, is it a burden? Is it an honor? Is it humbling? Like, what's the emotion you hit when you have this opportunity to be a storyteller for such a legendary band, for something that's going to carry on for generations and generations, just like the music?
So I should be so lucky that people read this book generations from now. I'll be lucky if my kids read it. But yes, I appreciate it. The idea is, and I mentioned the internet before. The internet is the greatest tool we have for sharing information, but it's also the greatest tool we have for sharing stuff that's not true.
Right.
And that's one of the reasons why I tackle books like this, because there's so many rumors that go out about bands, especially legendary bands like the Rolling Stones and ZZ Top. We hear all the stories. We've heard about Keith Richards supposedly getting his full blood transfusion somewhere in Europe. Things like that come up all the time. And so, that's really important to me, to look back at how these stories came about, and looking back to sources from the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, and when it really happened. Because, like I said, a lot of times these things get passed around and joked around. Like, for example, one of the great stories that I was able to kind of put together in this book was in the mid '80s. The ZZ Top put out the album Afterburner, which was kind of this space age concept album, which seems kind of weird when you think about this Texas band, that kind of had this cowboy image doing an album that had this space age theme of space travel and things like that. And it turns out how that came about is the designer of their stage for that tour, when he was putting it together, recommended that they go with that theme because the biggest space station in the United States is in Houston.
Right.
And he said, look, Houston's in Texas. That's part of that's part of the world of Texas and what Texas has brought to our culture.
Right.
You guys have a claim to do it. And so they did it. And I never thought that anyone really presented that really well before. So I was happy to kind of uncover that, because I myself was curious. How did they go from, the dusty plains of the borderlands to, flying through outer space?
And so some of the folks you talked to in the book as well I can only imagine that they were excited as well to have a chance, because everybody wants to talk to Billy Gibbons. Everybody wants to talk to the band, but to kind of talk to the people that helped make the band and help make the story of ZZ Top. I imagine they were excited as well to have a chance to tell their story while they're still alive and able to do it and have it documented. Was that rewarding for you to kind of be able to give that opportunity to so many people in this book to tell a side of their story that maybe they've never had an opportunity to?
Yeah, I have to. One of the things I really love about working on these books is, of course, you have the main guys or gals in the band, the rock stars. But I'll be honest, when I was working on my Rolling Stones book, Mick Jagger was not returning my call. But to me, we tend to forget that when bands go on tour or when bands are recording, these are huge operations.
Yeah.
That take many people, many talented people to be involved. And decades ago, people used to buy programs at concerts sometimes.
Yeah. They
don't really do that much anymore. And at least in the program, you could find out, who's the sound guy or the lighting designer. ZZ Top always gets promoted as this trio, which they are. They're probably next to Rush, the most famous rock trio, Rush and Cream. But the fact of the matter is, there's a lot of people that are involved putting on these concerts, recording these albums, that have stories to tell. So I'm really happy to talk to those people to find out their perspective.
Yeah, it's a great book. The book is Gimme All Your Lovin, The Blues, Boogie, and Beard of ZZ Top's Billy F. Gibbons. We've got the author, Christopher McKittrick, on the show with us. The book is available. You can pick it up. What's the best way for folks to pick up their very own copy of the book and to have this story? They can read it right there, as their reading leisure provides them by the pool this summer or whatever it may be. What's the best way to grab the book?
Excellent. Well, Amazon can deliver anywhere on earth at this point.
Yeah,
that's always a good choice. But I highly recommend swinging by your local bookstore, and if they don't have it in stock, see if they can order it for you, because it's always good to support the smaller bookstores out there. But anywhere you buy books, whether that's Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Books A Million, what have you, they'll be able to ship you a copy.
How cool is it as well, just as an author, to walk into a Barnes and Noble or whatever it may be, and there's your book on the shelf? Isn't that just one of the most chills on your arms feelings the first time that happens?
It is, and I have to admit that if I do find copies of my book on the shelf, I take them out and sign them and put them back on. I just really hope that they don't get sent back for vandalism because people don't recognize my autograph. But I figure at least somebody will pick it up somewhere someday, and that'll be a nice surprise.
Christopher, thank you so much for the time. It's a great read, and it's appropriate, like I said, with ZZ Top Friday night here in town. I know a lot of folks are going to go in with some new knowledge and new stories as they watch the band that they can share to the folks in the seats around them. Continue best of luck to you. Let's catch up again soon, but I really appreciate you taking some time for us this morning on D93.
Thank you so much. It's been great, and hope everyone enjoys the show.